Hi guys, this is Mark and I'm doing a recording for the second session in the AutoCAD CAD training, and I hope this is going to be helpful. Please subscribe below and ask any questions in the comments below as well, and tell me what you think of the lessons. If you want me to change some things or you want me to add something, let me know. Alright, so let's begin. Okay, so past 2 weeks, basically 2 weeks ago, we discussed the draw tool. Last week I was a bit sick, so I couldn't do a recording, but I'm doing a recording now. So we have the modify toolbar, which I'm going to be going into. Hopefully we can go into a bit of an annotation toolbar as well, if time permits. Okay, so our modify toolbar, we have got our first tool, which is move. Okay, and it's a standard tool. So you click on the move, then read at the bottom, it states in our command line, move the selected object. So we select our object. So move, select object. We select the object that we want to move. I'm going to move the circle. What I do is I would select the circle. I can select the circle in this type of a fashion via from the bottom right to the top left. That whatever's in the green is going to be then selected, and whatever that dashed line is cutting, it's going to select. So if I'm going to select this, let's say for instance you did that by mistake, you can press shift and deselect your rectangle. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, once I've selected the object that I'm wanting to move, or the objects that you want to move, you would right click and then select where you want to move from. So if I'm wanting to select from there, I can move that from my perpendicular point on the actual circle. So they say perpendicular point, it's basically to the tangent of the various quadrants. Okay, so I've just selected that point and moved it across. That's a standard move. Now if I wanted to move without utilizing the tool, so sometimes you are in a bit of a rush and you needing to get the job done, you can select the object, but what you would have to then do is select the center little point that is brought up, and then go through to a snap point. You can then place that in place. Alright, so if I'm wanting to move it, I can do that. Now the nice thing about this, you'll look at the bottom here, it says base point, copy, undo, exit. So I can move this around. I can place it wherever I'm wanting to place it, but at that point I can also make a copy. So if I'm going to make a copy, what I'll do is I'll come down and I'll select copy, and then I can make a copy. Alright, so wherever I'm wanting to place in, I can make a copy. Right click and press enter, or you can press escape. Remember, this is still selected, so press escape to escape the selection. Okay, alright, so you can see that's two methods of using the command to move, alright, and to copy. Okay, so here we've got copy, the standard copy. I can select as many objects as I want to copy, and then I again right click and I do the same thing. I'll select wherever I'm wanting to copy from, and I'll move it to where I'm wanting to move it. Okay, right click again, press enter or press escape to exit the command. Okay, now we have an interesting command which is called our stretch command. Now the stretch command, a lot of the guys, they get a little bit confused with the stretch command. The stretch command will utilize the green area. Okay, so it uses the green area of selection and the dashed line. So the dashed line, whatever is cutting, that dashed line, or the dashed line is cutting, whatever lines it's cutting is going to be stretched, and whatever is in the green is going to be moved. Alright, so how that will work is, once I've selected it, I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to select a point to displace from. Okay, so maybe I want to select that point to displace from, which is just a intersection of the circle with the line going through it. So I'll select that line and then I will move it forward, and you can see that it will bring forward the by that degree, by that amount. I can't exactly say degree, by the amount, it'll move forward but it stretches the two lines. Okay, similarly, I can select an object that I'm wanting to stretch. Okay, if I'm wanting to stretch an object, I can select it and I can go to the points that I'm wanting to stretch. Okay, so if that's the point that I'm wanting to stretch from, I can select that point and I can move it out. This is your standard type of selection that some of the guys will get confused with. They'll use this. It's when I've taught classes, they generally will utilize that, and it's sometimes helpful. But when you've got a large amount of lines, you can't go and select every single line and then from that then try and stretch it in this type of a manner. If you're wanting to stretch individual lines, that's fine. But if you are going to be stretching quite a few lines, it's not the ideal to stretch it. Okay, so that's another way of stretching, is if I'm wanting to stretch that particular line across all two lines, you can see how we can stretch it. So I can select that node and I can bring it across. Okay, or that point, or on the actual rectangle. Right, another useful command, Control Z, will undo what you have done. Okay, so if you don't want to do that, you can undo it by pressing Control Z. Alright, you have a standard undo button right at the top, and you can select the little arrow down and you can bring that right down, but it's going to undo 18 commands. So that's what you're going to be undoing, all of those commands. It's not just an individual command that it'll undo. Alright, I wish that would be actually quite nice if AutoCAD had to actually bring that in. If you can undo one specific command that you've done maybe 20 steps ago, that would be very useful. But instead, they've got the undo button, which will select pretty much all that you up to those 20 steps ago. So that's exactly how they would do it in AutoCAD. Alright. If we look at the top, we've got a rotate button. So the rotate button over here, you've got to do the selection once again. So okay, what I want to do is before I do this command, before I do the rotate command, I'm going to go into the layer properties and I'm going to change a layer. Okay, so I'm going to change the layer to make it thicker so you can see it. Right, so I've got a yellow layer over here which I've made up. If you want to make up a new layer, just go to, there's a little command right over there, press on that and then make the new layer. You can call it an outline, you can call it a hard line. It's just dependent on what you would like to call it. Alright, and make it a light color, or you can make it a dark color. Just depends. If you're making it a dark color, remember that you've got a black background. I can show you how to change that interface, but with the black background, the lighter color comes out more definite. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these lines, the line weight, to reflect a thicker line. Okay, I'm going to do the same with this one so that you can see, at least see it. Alright, and then I'm going to go out of that command. So there's my layer properties. I've just gone out of it. I will then select my outline. And in actual fact, let's make everything a visible layer. And I'm going to put the line weights on. So hopefully you can see that within this recording. Right, so now I'm going to take this object which I've drawn, okay, and I'm going to rotate it. Now it says specify the base point. I've just selected all of that and it tells me to specify a base point. So I'm going to specify a base point. The base point, let's make it 10 outside. Okay, and now you can see it's gone gray. Okay, if I'm wanting to make a copy, I can make a copy. If I'm wanting to reference, I'll show you how to do the referencing as well. But if I'm wanting to make a copy, it's very useful to make a copy. But if you're not going to use that, again, then don't make a copy. It's just going to be saving you some time if you're going to not make a copy then in that case. Okay, so here I've gone and I'm wanting to rotate it. And you can see it's looking at degrees. So that's 270. If I'm going to go 90, if I'm going to go 180, or if I'm going to go 270. Now you can select a point wherever. It could be a point that you're wanting to just rotate from. I like that particular point, so I'm going to rotate it to there. Okay. And the middle button, remember on the mouse itself, if I double click the middle button, it is going to then zoom extends. Right. So there's my rotate. If I'm going to rotate it now through to a reference, and let me draw up a line as a reference point. Okay, so I'm going to bring a line down to that point there, and I'm going to draw it at an angle, a random angle of, let's say, 48 degrees. Okay, so now select that object. I then click on my rotate. It tells me to specify the base point. So my base point will be from that bottom of the line. Okay, now it says reference. Now I'm going to click on my reference, specify the reference angle. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this angle here, straight up to that point, and then it says the new angle. Now watch what happens when we do reference. Okay, it's to that angle now. And we can delete that line. Right. If we look at mirror, we need to have a mirror line. Now in 2D, a mirror line is exactly like a mirror. It's just the mirror is an object, but we can look at the mirror as a 2D face that will then I'm then able to look into the mirror and I'll see double the distance at my face, but just in opposite. Okay, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'll show you how this is done then. Okay, so I'm going to draw up a line, and this line I'm going to just make vertical. Right, you can draw up your lines wherever you need to actually have it. Okay, and I'm going to then select the object, click on my mirror, and then I'm going to select the line that I'm wanting to mirror by. Okay, and then I click either yes or no if I want to erase the object, or if I don't want to erase the object. When I press enter, you can see the object is completely mirrored. So like I said, if I'm looking into a normal mirror on a 2D side view, I will see double the distance of my face on the other side. Okay. Okay. This particular tool is known as our scale tool. Now when I scale an object, it tells me to select the object. So whether I'm selecting it outside or whether I'm selecting it as in normal selection, I will then I'm going to select my object that I'm wanting to scale down. Okay, so that's the object I'm wanting to scale down. I right click. Okay, now it tells me to specify a base point. So my base point, I'm going to make it right at that point there, and then it says that I need to either have a scale factor, so I can enter a scale factor. It means that it's just going to scale it down, but it's not going to make a copy, and it's not going to be referenced scale. Okay, so it will be a scale factor, like as in 1. If I'm going to say 1 is to 2, it's going to be 1 divided by 2. Or if I'm going to say 2 is to 1, it's going to be 2 divided by 1. Okay, or by a multiple of 2. Okay, if it's going to be 5 times, it's just going to be a multiple of 5. So you just place in 5, and it's 5 times bigger that it'll become. If you want it to be scaled down by 1 is to 5, you will say 1 divided by 5. Okay, so here I'm going to say 1 divided by 2. You can see exactly what will happen. Okay, so use that point as a reference, and there it's now gone down by 2 times its size. Okay, that's what would happen with our scale. Remember, guys, look at the copy as well. When you just click on copy, it'll also copy it for you. It's very useful. Okay, that's within the model spaces. Alright, so now we come to our trim. Okay, trim, the standard trim. If I'm going to trim anything here, what I tend to do is I'll either select my lines that I can use for trimming, and then right click and then select everything that is inside or wherever I'm wanting to trim. Okay, so the lines that I've selected for trimming, I can then select it, and then you'll notice that even if I click on here, I can't trim those lines. Okay, those lines are used for the trimming boundary, so that it won't go outside of that boundary, or sorry, not outside, it'll go outside or inside the boundary, but it only uses that as your boundary to trim. Okay, if I had to trim this line over here, you can see it's telling me it's not wanting to trim, and the reason being is because the line's already cut here. Okay, so if I had used these bottom circles as a trim line, I could go in there and you'll see it's going to show me. So a little no entry sign there is quite useful, telling you that it's not going to be able to do it. Once I'm happy with that, I press escape and I come out of the command. Okay, I'm going to go into just using the trim as in standard. So I'm going to say select the trim and right click in the window, and now I can click pretty much on anything to trim and it's going to trim. Okay, so here I'm going to select that line, and let's select that, and let's select that. Alright, so you can see it's trimming wherever I'm wanting it to trim. Okay, so there we go. You've got, that's just going and selecting your trim and right clicking in the window. You're then able to select whatever lines that you've got, and it's going to utilize every single line as a boundary line. Press escape to come out of the command. Alright, and there's a little arrow right next to it. So the arrow right next to it is going to help us. It's called our extend. Okay, so the extend at the bottom, so there's trim and extend. When I select that arrow, I can go down to extend and select the extend. Now, if I say select all objects, I can select an object to become the boundary line once again. Okay, right click and you'll see what happens. Once I select that, it then clicks to the extent of that line. If I select that one, it clicks to extends the line straight through to the border. Now if I try and select it again, it's going to show me it can't. Okay, so it's not going to extend further. However, okay, we can escape that. However, if I select that and I right click in the window, I can select it, and you'll see that it will now go to the extent of that line. Now if there are any other lines here, I can select and select, and it'll carry on going through to the next lines. Okay, we can press escape. Alright, let's look at our next command. Our next command is called our fillet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my nice little rectangle, and I'm going to use my fillet. Now it says here, fillet, select the first object. Okay, so I select the first object. It tells me to select the second object, and it's not making a fillet. Alright, so what it's telling us here at the bottom, it says select the first object or undo polyline radius. Okay, I select my radius, and what I'm going to then do with the radius is I'm going to give it a radius of say 10 mil. If it extends past the amount, it's going to tell you that as well. So let's just say 10. Okay, now when I select the line and I select this line, I want you to just take note. There we go. It's giving me a full 10 mil radius curve. Okay, that is known as my fillet. Chamfer on the other hand, so the little arrow that is right next to the fillet, I can click on that and I'll go down to chamfer. Chamfer on the other hand, if I look down here, it says distance, and let's give the chamfer a distance of 10 mil. So it tells me the one distance, and it tells me another distance. Okay, let's make that 5. So the second distance I'll make 5. So the first line is for the 10 mil distance, and the second line is for the 5 mil distance. It will take off from the point. Okay. That then deals with our chamfer. What I tend to do is I enjoy using chamfer and stating the distance being 0, enter, 0, enter. And what we'll do is we'll select that line and that line just to get through to a point. Sometimes it's useful, especially when you are working under a deadline. It does help on a 2D scale. Right, the blend curve. I'm not going to go into blend curve at the moment. I want you to just play around with the tools that I'm showing you. Okay, so for now we won't go into blend curve. We are going to look at rectangular array. But for rectangular array, I'm going to select one of the circles. I'm also going to make a copy of this circle, and I'm going to bring it out. So I'm going to array the circle, and what array actually means is it's going to make columns and rows of those circles, of whatever object that you have selected or any lines that you have selected. Okay, so rectangular array makes our columns and our rows, and you can see here, there it's made our columns and rows on the one side. Okay, it's obviously selected that circle. Why did it select that circle? It's due to the fact that I did not unselect the circle. So let's go back into the command and let's select this circle, right click, and you'll see it comes up with this. Now it's very useful because we can see here the columns, the spacing between, the total spacing, right? The rows, the spacing between the rows and the total. Okay, now if we're on a 3D scale, you'll go up into the levels as well, but we're not in the 3D scale here. We're not in the 3D platform. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place in 6, and I'm going to make the distance a 10 mil distance, or a 10. You can use 5 or 10 or whatever distance you would like to use, and we can make the rows 4. Okay, and we place a 10 mil distance here too. Okay, now I'm going to press escape. So you can see if I select one of these, it is not associated with the whole of the array, but you can associate as well with the array. And what I will do is select associative. Okay, and let's place in these values once again. Right, I'm going to press exit, and when I select, now because it is associative, it then selects all of it and it goes back into the array command. If I escape that, it goes outside of it. So it's literally grouped it into a group of circles in rows and columns. If I go down, you will see path array. The path array I'm not going to go into at this moment, but the polar array I'm going to do. Right, so polar array, we will first select our circle, and I'm going to copy this one. Once again, I'm going to copy it to that side, and I'm also going to draw a line so that you can see what's going to happen here. Let's make this line 15 mil. Now when I select this line and the circle, I can then hit polar array. It tells me specify the center point of the array or your base point axis of rotation. So I'm going to specify the center point of my array. Okay, and when I select that, you can see it comes up looking like that. there's 6 items. Maybe I don't want it to be 6 items, I want it to be 8. And you'll see that the spacing between automatically adjusts, and the reason for that is because I've said that I want it to fill the full 360 degrees of a circle. Okay, so here it's filled the 360 degrees, and you can see it's all evenly spaced by 45 degrees. Okay, it tells me rows, it tells me levels, and once again, associative, base point, rotate item direction. I can change my direction as well, but in this particular case I don't need to. When I've got something like 180 degrees, you'll see the need to change that direction if you're needing that direction to change. Okay, so there we can change our direction. Okay, press escape. If you click on it again, because associative was selected, you'll see it comes back into it. Right. Our standard arrays. If I select arrays, it tells me to select the object. So let's say I'm wanting to select the 3. I then right click and then it takes it out. Okay. So that's utilization of arrays. If I'm going to explode, let me explain what explode is about. So if I'm going to select this, you'll see that that is associative, so it's combined as one. Alright, so if I'm going to, I can move it all as one at one given time, and you'll see it move over. Okay, if I bring that down, I can do that. So that's the nice thing about associative. Okay, I can also just make these bigger, and it then widens it. So that's the nice thing about associative. But let's say, for instance, you don't want it to be associative. It's more like a block, what we would term as a block. In AutoCAD, in MicroStation, you would term it a cell. All right, which just means that it's all one object, and it's not going to be changed. You can't change that object. It's just one object, unless it's associative. But if I'm not wanting it to be one object and I'm wanting to select certain circles out of these patterns here that I've made, then what I will do is I will select that, go back to my home tab, and then what we will do is we'll say explode. Okay, so when I exploded, the items become individual items. Okay, so now I can select all 3 and hit my erase, and there's all 3 erased. Okay, so you can see it's not associative anymore. Okay, our offset button, this is a very, very handy tool. When we offset, we can offset by distances. So if you are doing architectural drawings, let's say, for instance, with the little help of your imagination, you can look at this shape as a house. Okay, now it tells me when we state, when it says you must offset your distance. So I'm going to offset the distance by a certain amount. Now I need to be careful here because it's not the size of the house over here in this case. This is a very, very, very small house. These are for miniature people. Alright, so if I'm going to offset, I'm going to make it either maybe by 2 mil. Okay, so now when I select the object that I'm wanting to offset and go inside, you can see it offsets it by 2 mil. You can measure that distance, that's 2 mil. And I can do that again and again until I'm happy. Okay, so if that's how I'm wanting to do it, I can offset as many times and you'll see that the increments are exactly spaced out. Now there's offset that I would use for household, for housing walls. If you are in South Africa, we would use our internal walls at 110 millimeters, or your external walls at 220 millimeters. or it can go up by 240, 250. It just depends on your thickness of your wall. But yeah, we would then utilize our offset to do so. If you are somewhere else, then you would have to go by the standards of which that country will state. So as far as the drafting is concerned in that country, you would have to look at the standards that, or the criteria that they would request. Right, so here our modify, there's a little modify button right at the bottom, just like your draw tool had a little button there and allowed us to go into additional tools. Our modify tool has the same apply, same arrow draw that you can see there. So we click on that little arrow and it then opens up its draw. Okay, and I want to just highlight a few of these commands here. I'm not going to go into every single one of these commands. The one command that I'm wanting to do is our breakpoint. So let's say, for instance, you're wanting to break a point on a standard line. Now, if I'm going to break a point on this line, it's not going to be much of a difference because it's all one. Okay, so if I select the line and I select where I'm wanting to break it, if I select that line here, okay, it's done it. Alright, so it has broken the line, but then it's also broken that line there. Whereas if I'm going to look at, it's just selected the full line over there. So now it's decided to break it at 2 points there. Okay, but the idea here is to make sure that if I'm selecting a line, I can break that line in how many ever places I'm wanting to break it. Okay, so I'm going to, let's select this line here. Okay, I'm going to break this line in the center so you can see what's happening. We break the line in the center. Now that line is an individual line and that line is an individual line. So there's two individual lines. If you're wanting to join the lines together, and I can show you like this, if we just extend that out so you've got a little gap there. If I'm wanting to join the lines, I'll use join. I'll select the one line, select the next line, right click, and it's supposed to join, but due to the fact that that line is a polyline, it's not joining. So this would then be recognized as a single line. So the bottom line would be recognized as a single line. Let's take that line and explode that line first. And let's try it again. Join, select that line, right click. It's still not doing it. Okay, I'm going to select this line, explode that. Let's try it one more time. If it doesn't work, I'll have to show you with individual lines. Yes. Okay, so both lines needed to be exploded because it recognized both lines as polylines. So it then joins it as one line again. I'm wanting to break the line, so I can select there and then I can break it wherever I'm wanting to break it. Okay, so remember it's clicking to the snap points, so it's going to break the line slightly and then it's snapping to a point on the actual line there. Right, so those are the three tools that I wanted to show you. Okay, within our draw here. The other tools I'm not going to show you at this present time, as I'm wanting you to just get the gist of how to do the a not advanced course but more of a practical beginner's course. Let's look at annotation. Okay, so our annotation command, or we can see over here, here is our standard annotation, but at the same, we've got a tab at the top, which shows us annotate as well at the same time. So I think once I've completed annotation, I think we will stop there for the, as far as the lesson is concerned, and in the following lesson, I will then carry on with the layers. I'll go into a little bit more depth on the layers itself so that you can then understand how to do that. Now, annotation is important because remember our standards have to come through in the annotation. Annotation can either mess up a drawing, or it could really show that you are quite professional in the drawings. Okay, so I'm going to go through to the Home tab, because the Home tab just gives you the basics there. And I'm going to click on your standard text. Now there's two types of text. There's multi-line and single line. Multi-line text allows you to start to type, but then press you can then press enter. It'll then go below and whatnot. But I want you to take notes. It's taking you directly into an annotative text editor, annotation text editor. So you'll see here it's telling you that it's 0.2 mil high. So if I'm going to type here, okay, so this is just standard typing, and I click outside, it makes it extremely small. That's no good, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to then go back into the annotation, but this time, instead of going into multi-text or single line text, I'm going to select the text style to change the standard. Okay, when I go into the text style, you'll see that there's two, annotative and standard. Now the annotative, I use the annotative mainly on my layouts, and in the layouts I will then place in, let's say for instance, the different sizes on the layout. So it's annotative to the layout. What the layout does is, in essence, it's like a paper that you are drawing on. Now annotative will ensure that if you have made your height, your text height 3 mil, it's going to be 3 mil on the paper size. Okay, that's if you set it to that. Okay, so I'm wanting to create a new text style. So I'm going to go new, which is on the right hand side. Click on new, and I'm going to say ISO. Let's make it capital letters, ISO 2.5. Okay, so 2.5 is a standard. However, it sometimes does not work with the point. So I'm going to say 2.5 there. It has worked with the point now, so which is quite lacquer. It's quite nice, right? I then select that. I'm going to change my height of the ISO to 2.5 millimeters high. I can make that annotative. I don't want it aerial. I go over to ISO, what we would term ISO CP, which is the standard that we use out in industry. In some other industries, they'll use a different type of font that is just specific to the industry that they are working in, or to the standard of the specific company. So let's say, for instance, the company enjoys Arial because they think it actually is more defined. It comes out and it gives them a professional look to their drawings. Then you just go with the standard that they are referring to. Okay, so I like going with the standard ISO CP IV50. You'll see this how it looks. It gives you a little bit of a view. Okay, so 2.5 ISO CP IV50 annotative, and I'm going to press apply. Let's press close. Now when I go into the multi-line text, it's going to give me this: select your annotation scale. I'm going to keep it 1:1, and then I'm going to bring that in. Okay, so now let us type in, okay, my name, okay, and you'll see and scale. All right, or I'm going to just say title and scale. Now there's a reason why I'm doing it like this. I pressed enter and I go down to the bottom and I type in scale, and let's just put in a scale 1:1. Okay, if you are drawing in mechanical, sometimes in mechanical, what the guys, some of the standards, they will state that it must be central beneath the drawing, at least about 20 mil off from the drawing. So they go into very, we would term this pedantic. They are very pedantic about the various types of drawings and how it needs to look. So it's really it's going to portray the company. It portrays the company to the various clients. That drawing is important in portraying or even making a sale. I've done drawings for companies where they have needed drawings to sell a product, and it works. You know, the aesthetics of the drawing needs to be such that it's neat enough, and the companies like it wherever the drawings are going. Okay, and plus it bears your name. So now I've got my title and scale, but if it's going to be central, what I'll tend to do is come across here, and you'll see that I can center it there. Okay, or my preference is to use a thing called Justification. Okay, at the moment it's on top left, and what does that mean? It just means that if I select go outside of the command, so I just click outside, if I select it, there is my point of justification, or it's an M-text location. Okay, so if I'm going to bring that in to wherever I'm going to move it or copy it, I can copy it from that point. I'm going to double click to go back into the command, go back into the justification, and I'm going to say top center, and you can see that it automatically centralizes your text. Click outside, select it once again, and there's my point of reference, my text location. Right. Single line text, on the other hand, if I'm going to select single line text, okay, so it gives you just single lines. So if I'm going to say title, all right, I can't press if I'm pressing enter, I'm going to type in, okay, and let's place in scale. You need to see what happens now. When I click outside, then also go back into the command. Wherever I'm going, I'll go back into the command, press escape rather, and you will see now when I select, it selects only single line, and my location, my text location point is at the bottom, so I can use that point and that point. But it then goes, I've got to then look at just see how the drawing looks, or see how the text looks, and then centralize it in accordance to how I think. And that really comes out, it comes out quite untidy when you've got 100 drawings and every single thing is different. My title and my scale, so I've got my title then, which is slightly closer to the text on the scale, or it's titled slightly further away, and on each drawing it's different. That also is just it's just not acceptable when it comes to some of the engineers. They don't enjoy that, so don't do that. Rather utilize your multi-line text, which will then be consistent, unless you're wanting to place in, let's say for instance, multiple texts all over the show, say for instance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it means that it goes all over, then I will use my single line text to do that. Right, so you can see when I click on that little draw at the bottom, it shows you what is selected here. It's ISO 2.5. Our dimensions, I will go into the dimension style, because we've still got a standard here as well. So we've got standard and annotative. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to create another style, dimension style. And I'm going to call this dimension style dim ISO 2.5. Okay. Let's make it annotative as well. And click on continue. Okay, so here it shows me my new dimension style and the name, dim ISO 2.5. I can now change everything that I've got. So the arrows, if I'm happy by block, that's fine. If I'm happy, that's fine. But here it says my baseline spacing 0.38. And really and truthfully, if you're going to change something here, let's say for instance I state 2, watch what happens here. If anything doesn't happen, okay, if anything happens here, it's generally is fine. If it's if you weren't wanting it to change, look at what happens in your view. Okay, look here, if I'm suppressing any lines, I'm suppressing one of the arrows. Extension lines by block, that's fine. Remember, when it says by block, it's just the layer or the line, how it looks, the line type, the line style, the line thickness. Okay, so there it's showing me line type. The line type, if I go into it, it says by block. This is continuous, or it's a center line, or it's a, and we know that it has to be a continuous line. The line weight, it has to be a thin line, especially for dimensions, so we generally make it 0.25, or I keep it by block. Okay, now the extension beyond the line, if I change that to 2 mil, or extension from the origin, I want you to take note what is going to happen. Okay, so it shows you the extension is going way over, but remember, the standard text was 0.2, so that standard text over there is 0.2. If I go over to text tab, I will see that the 0.18, so it's even smaller. I will then change my text style over here over to the 2.5, my ISO 2.5. Now it says here text alignment, horizontal or aligned with dimension. You can see what's happening there. Horizontal, aligned with dimension, ISO standards. I like ISO standard, that's fine for me. So here text placement, centered. So I can center it vertically and I can center it horizontally. Okay, so I'm going to state above, so it's above the line, and our offset from the dim line, let's place it at 1 mil, and you'll see what happens here once again. Okay, so it then gives you a 1 mil spacing above. Let's go back to our lines. When we say offset from origin, you can see that the dim line, the dimension line, is 1 with the drawing. I don't want it to be 1 with the drawing. I want it offset at least about a 2 mil due to our standards that we have, and you can see that it offsets it by 2 mil. Okay, so that helps quite a bit. Go over to the symbols. The arrow's fine, the arrowhead's fine, arrowhead's fine. So with the first, second, and my leader, okay, all of that is fine. Sometimes we'll make the leader as a dot, but in this case I'm just going to keep it as closed filled. The arrow size, now the arrow size will make a difference. Sometimes we'll make it 3, sometimes we'll make it 2.5, and it brings back the arrow head, because that arrow size is very, very small. Our center mark, I'm also going to just make that maybe a 1.5. Okay. Alright, so if you are happy with that, then we're going to look at our primary. Now the primary precision, if I'm wanting it to be very, very precise, it's going to be, I could make it 1,000th of a millimeter, I could make it 20,000th of a 10,000th of a millimeter, I could make it even more, not 20,000, but you can see what's happening there. I can make it extremely accurate to the 0.000001 or wherever I'm wanting to bring it down to, so we can make it nano. Okay, if you really want to do that. Okay, I'm just going to place it directly on the precision of 0. My rounding off, I could make that rounding off, let's say 0.00. My scale factor, I can keep it as 1. The scale factor works very differently, so it works in this type of way. If you're working in your model space, which is this tab here, so we can see at the bottom, my bottom left, model space. The model space, you use your scale factor. Now the scale factor here is going to determine what that object size is going to be. So you saw how we scaled down one of the drawings. Now if I use a scale factor, I can't say 1 divided by 2 here, but I would have to use a scale factor of 2. And what will happen is, remember, if I've scaled down the object, it is going to make the drawing smaller. However, let's say for instance the size it was 200 mils, and now I've scaled it down by 2 times, which makes it 100 mils, but I still need to reflect 200 mils on my dimension. So I'll place in then a scale factor of 2, and you'll see exactly what's going to happen inside. So it doubles up here in order for me to reflect the a true reflection of what the object is going to be in real life. Okay, the alternate units, if you are going to be doing tolerances, you can see over here symmetric, deviations, limits, and your basics. I'm not going to go into that at this present time. It's just going to give you more of your deviations, it's basic tolerances that you are working with. Guys that are mechanical in mind, they work with a lot of the tolerances, precision and deviation. The reason for the deviations, at times we've got various factors if we are working with steel, or if we're working with a type of metal. There's various factors involved, and that's why we use our deviations and tolerances and whatnot to indicate how much we are allowing. We are allowing for tolerance. I'm going to give you an example. If we take steel, for instance, we will drill a hole into the steel, but we'll make it 2 mil wider than the bolt that goes into that hole. Okay, and the reason why we would make it 2 mil wider is because if I'm going to drill it to the exact size of the bolt, if it goes to site, if there's a little bit of heat on site, or let's say for instance it was extremely hot inside the workshop and now you've drilled it to the exact bolt size and it goes over to site, the people on site are going to be very upset with you because the bolts are not going to fit in. Okay, it won't fit in at all. So the reason why we do that, we will have a 2 mil tolerance in order for the bolts to then fit. Okay, so that's just plain straightforward information that you can take it or leave it. Okay, I'm going to click OK, and there we see I'm happy with that dimension there, and I'm going to click on that and say set current. Okay, let's close that. Now when I come over to let's take this particular object here, I'm going to click on my dimension, and I can click on that. Remember, we divided the line, and note it's taking up it's looking at the outline layer, so you can see it's become thick. So we generally will have another layer for our dimensions, and we make sure that that layer is going to reflect everything as far as our standards are concerned. So whether the line is thin or whether it's thick, or whether our text height is, so it must reflect what the text layer thickness must be, and the dim line, the dimension line itself, also must reflect what the line weight must be, what the thickness of the line must be. Okay, I'm going to press escape. I want you to play around with this. There's linear dimensions, aligned dimensions, angular dimensions, radius, diameters. Okay, so go up to diameters, radiuses, angular lengths. You can do arc length as well. So all of these you can play around with. We can discuss that a little bit more at a later stage, but I'm going to stop there at that point. Okay, so I hope that this lesson was informative and helpful, and I hope that you can practice and try it out. It's extremely fun when you start to utilize all the commands, and when you know what you're doing in AutoCAD, you can really get around doing your own designs. If you want to do your own house plans, you can start to do that already with the commands that I have shown you, and the different like the layers and the various things that I've shown you. You can actually start doing a small little house plan and utilize the commands. Utilize it as much, because when you practice it, it really helps you. It makes perfect at the end of the day. Okay, Remember, guys, to subscribe and then also to ask any questions below. And I will be looking at those questions about 2 times to 3 times a week. I'll look at the comments below just to answer some of your questions. If there is something that I don't know, I'm going to then try and find out for you, so as to just help you as much as what I can, and hopefully at the end of the day you can become very proficient in AutoCAD, and possibly get a job in AutoCAD, as a designer or whatnot. All right, thank you very much.